So yesterday we looked at how to solve equations by square roots. So today we're going to look at something where we have to do a little more work after we do the square root. And so sometimes what you're going to find is that an entire quantity will be the squared term. We can still solve using square roots when we do this. And so if you look at example 1 down here, you'll see it's not just the x squared, but it's this entire quantity in parentheses here. Here's what's important. Since this is in parentheses with the squared on the outside, that means we're not allowed to get inside those parentheses until the squared is gone. So it would be wrong to add 1 to both sides. You cannot do that because that whole set of parentheses is locked down until the squared is gone. And so what we talked about yesterday is that to eliminate a squared, we use the inverse, which is the square root. So the squared, or the square root, all it does is take off the squared. So I'm left with what's inside the parentheses. Notice that now it's free. We've gotten it out of those parentheses there, so we're good to go. Don't forget also that when we square root in an equation, we get 2 solutions. So we have x minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 5. Now we're going to leave that plus or minus right now because you can see now we've solved for x minus 1, but we still haven't solved for x. And so the last thing we're going to have to do here is add 1 to both sides. Now, you cannot just add the 1 to the 5 and make plus or minus 6. And here's why. On the left, I get x. But on the right, I'm going to put that 1 in front of the plus or minus 5. So now this is an expression. It does not just stand for positive 5 and negative 5. It stands for either 1 plus 5 or 1 minus 5. And that doesn't give us positive or negative 6. That gives us positive 6, but 1 minus 5 gives us negative 4. So you have to evaluate the two expressions. Go ahead and try number 8 on your own. So once we've done number 8, what we'll do is we'll square root both sides and we get x plus 7. But this is one of the weird ones where when you square root 0, you don't get plus or minus, you just get 0. So that means I only get one answer. I subtract from both sides and that's all I get. If you look at number 9, we do not have the squared term by itself because the squared piece is just x minus 3 squared. So to start, we're going to divide by 4 on both sides. So I get x minus 3 squared equals 9 over 4. Now I'm ready to use the square root to get my parentheses free. And so I get x minus 3 equals plus or minus. Always put that in after you do the square root. The nice thing about this is that we have perfect squares. So we have 3 over 2. That comes out evenly. And then we'll add 3 to both sides, so we get positive 3 plus or minus 3 over 2. Now, I do need to split these apart, so we're going to have to think about fractions. 3 plus 3 over 2, and then we'll have to do 3 minus 3 over 2. So don't forget that when we do fractions, we need a common denominator. Right now, these 3's are over 1. To make them into halves, I'm going to multiply them by 2. So I get 6 over 2 plus 3 over 2. That means my first answer, I'm running out of room here, would be 9 halves. Again, this is going to make 6 over 2 just like it did on the other one. And so 6 minus 3 gives me 3 halves, and that's our second solution. On number 10, the very last problem, we'll start by square rooting both sides. So I get 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus 6. I hope you thought plus or minus in your head. Now what we're going to do is we're going to leave that plus or minus 6 as one thing until I get to the very last step. So I'll subtract 1. Remember to put that in front of your plus or minus, so that makes it negative 1 plus or minus 6. And then I have to divide by 2. So x is going to equal this stuff right here. And so what we have to do is come up here and work that out. I need to do negative 1 plus 6 divided by 2, and then I need to do negative 1 minus 6 divided by 2. Well, negative 1 plus 6 is 5, and 5 halves doesn't reduce, so there's one solution. Negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7 over 2, and that also doesn't reduce, so there is the other solution. And if you look at 11, 12, 13, and 14, this is just more practice with the same stuff. But again, it's using your calculators to round to the nearest hundredth instead. So it would be the same process, but instead of leaving your square roots in square root form, you'll go ahead and put the square roots into your calculator and get a decimal approximation. So that's it for today.